Just wanted to let you all know we're going to start the meeting in about 5 minutes. If you could let us know in the chat if you could hear us, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm Dave Rader with ACHD and your project manager for the Kootenai Street Traffic Calming Project. I'm excited to be here before you today to present an update on this project. Before we kind of dig into the design and go through that, we're going to run through some meeting logistics. And to start that off, want to let you all know this meeting is being recorded, and we will post a recording of the meeting on our project webpage. There's a link that will be posted in the chat feature of this WebEx meeting. Please take note of that. All attendees are muted. Please use the chat feature to enter any questions you have or comments. We have a team working here. They'll record those questions and respond to them throughout the presentation. Also, following the presentation, there's a Q&A session, so we will be here to answer questions you may have. Again, all questions submitted through the chat. We have some expectations about the chat. Using the chat, we just ask everyone, all the participants, to be respectful and considerate of each other. Any demeaning or derogatory comments or vulgar language will not be permitted. We will remove those individuals from the meeting if we find any that are doing that. It's important that we track who's attending this meeting. So also in the chat feature, there'll be a link to a survey. We just ask you to go to that link and complete the survey so we can make note that you were here and attended. We'll post this link throughout the meeting, so if you miss it, don't worry about it. It'll appear again. And then lastly, for logistics, starting tomorrow, this presentation will be available online, so you can comment on it through the online tool. That link is kootenaitrafficcalming.com. You can also access that link through the project webpage. The information on there will be available through July 22nd, and that is the date comments are due as well. So with that, I'm going to take you through some project history. Pearson, if you wouldn't mind changing the slide. So starting in 2018, the project originated through a neighborhood petition that was submitted to ACHD for us to investigate traffic calming measures along Kootenai Street between Orchard and Vista. In 2018 and 2019, ACHD, with the help of the neighborhood, developed the recommended concept. In 2021, we began the design process based on the recommended concept for the project. And construction is anticipated to begin in 2022. I'm going to take you through briefly through our public outreach. Pearson, if you don't mind changing slides. So in 2018, ACHD conducted 3 public involvement meetings. On March 1st of 2018, that was our first public involvement meeting, and we asked if traffic calming was necessary along Kootenai Street, and what we heard was yes, it was. We hosted another public involvement meeting in July of 2018, and what we learned in that meeting is the trees along Kootenai were important characteristic of the neighborhood, and the public would not support removing or taking down those trees for the project. Following that meeting, we held our 3rd meeting where we presented the recommended concept study for Kootenai. And in that meeting, we learned that the public was in support of the recommended concept. Now that I've kind of taken you through the project history, I'm going to turn this over to our design consultant, Pearson DeWitt of HDR. He's going to take you through some of the design details.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everybody. What we're going to talk through here is kind of some of the main traffic calming features and improvements that have taken place or that are proposed to take place along the corridor. As Dave previously mentioned, the project improvements extend from Orchard Street to Vista Avenue. And this graphic that you see here kind of talks about some of the components associated with the project. So these areas where we talk about chicanes, those are going to be proposed to be placed along these areas in the purple. Just so you have an understanding of a chicane, it's a traffic calming device that reduces vehicle travel speed. One of the things to note is during the concept phase, we had identified that the chicanes were going to go over, the bike lanes go through the chicanes and they were going to go along the elevation of the chicane. Those are now going to stay at the elevation of the roadway. So that's a minor change that's taken place between the concept and where we're at in the design phase. It's going to help out with drainage. There's pretty substantial cost savings associated with that. And that's representative with this graphic here. Again, it gives you some additional information with respect to the chicanes. These are proposed to be located at Orchard and Kootenai, Roosevelt and Kootenai, Kootenai Place and Kootenai, Layton and Vista. And we'll have a graphic that we're going to look at after we get past this slide that'll give some more specific detail to where those are going to be placed. Along the second improvement, for item number 2, I should say, we're identifying the fact that there's going to be bike lanes along both sides of the roadway along this component of it. It does maintain the on-street parking on the south side of the street. On the north side, that will be replaced with a bike lane. And then one of the things I also wanted to share with you today is at the intersection of Roosevelt and Layton, the previous concept hadn't identified the need for any sort of signal intersection improvements. We are going to move forward with incorporating signalized upgrades at those intersections. A lot of that is due to the fact that the signals have been in operation for many years and they've their useful life has been extended beyond what it would normally be. And it's also going to help out with providing directional access for walking paths along Kootenai and Roosevelt and Layton and Kootenai, excuse me. And this is, excuse me. So as we move down the corridor, as we get past Layton, what we have is an area. So there are no sidewalks currently that exist along Layton or along Kootenai east of Layton. So what we're doing with this proposed project is we're going to add sidewalk along the north side of the road in the place where the on-street parking is currently. So where the existing curb is now in is where you're going to see the new sidewalk get placed. And then there'll be a bike lane along that side, 2 10-foot travel lanes, a bike lane along the south side, and that will continue all the way to Vista. So I'm going to get out of this graphic for now, if I can. Can't get out of this graphic. There we go. Pardon me. Okay, so that is the basic rundown of the changes that have taken place since the concept and gives you a basic overview of what is being proposed along the corridor from Orchard to Vista. These next couple slides are going to really show some more specific detail. We're going to kind of walk through 6 distinct segments that we've identified along the corridor. It's going to provide a little bit more detail as to what it is we're proposing to do along the corridor. You'll notice this first segment we're going to talk about is Orchard Street, from Orchard to Kootenai Place. And when you navigate, when this is available tomorrow, you can click on each one of these tabs to get a closer image of these, similar to what I've been doing as I've been navigating. So we'll walk through this. As you'll notice, the green highlighted sections indicate where the bike lanes are proposed to be placed. This orange area shows where the chicanes are going to be placed. As you'll notice, chicanes are identified pretty much directly east of the Orchard and Kootenai intersection. The blue represents the fact that there will be parking that will be retained along the south side between the bike lane and the edge of the road. As we move past Pond Street, there's going to be another set of chicanes that will be placed along this portion of Kootenai. And then as we work to the end of this segment, for segment number 1, Kootenai Place, you'll notice that it's 2 vehicle travel lanes, bike lanes north and south, and then parking on the south side of the street. Moving on to section 2, this will be from Kootenai Terrace to Roosevelt. And it'll be similar to what we just saw on the last segment. Once we get past Kootenai Terrace, bike lanes both sides, 2 vehicle travel lanes, and then parking on the south side. As we get near Abbey Circle, there's going to be 2 chicanes that are going to be placed, again, to help reduce through traffic speed. Moving past Abbey Circle and almost all the way to Roosevelt, you'll notice, again, bike lanes north and south, vehicle lanes on either side, and then on-street parking to the south side of the street. Just before we get to the Roosevelt-Kootenai intersection, there is a set of chicanes, again, as you get into the intersection. So moving on to the next segment, Roosevelt to Latah. As we just move past the intersection of Roosevelt, another set of chicanes will be placed in advance of this access place here. As we move past the intersection, as we work our way east, it goes into a scenario. Now, keep in mind, there's existing sidewalk along here now for portions of it, but we're going to be adding some sidewalk. And these little orange spaces you see might be of interest to some of you. That's identifying kind of where we're going to be replacing the driveway in order to make sure that we're maintaining access to your property. Again, similar to what we were talking about though. So we've got 2 vehicle travel lanes, 2 bike lanes, and on-street parking along the south side. That continues along Kootenai pretty much until we get just past Berkeley Street, where the bike lanes will shift a little bit farther to the south. We will develop another set of chicanes just in advance of the Latah intersection. And again, just to reinforce the fact that I know we spoke about this earlier, but we will be doing signalized intersection improvements at Latah. Segment 4, or section 4, is from Latah to Hawaiihoshone. Once we move past Latah, again, big surprise, another set of chicanes that are going to be taking place directly east of the intersection, again, to try to reduce travel speeds. Bike lanes throughout the corridor are maintained. We are, as a part of the concept, it was determined that we were going to be adding a RRFB at Johnson. That's to help promote pedestrian access north and south of this intersection, and there's a school that kids are trying to get to, so that's another improvement feature that we're going to deal with. And then you'll notice, I'll zoom in on this a little bit, you'll notice that we're showing the proposed sidewalk past Latah. Again, the thing to keep in mind is that this is going to be placed at where the curb exists right now today. So if you went out and you looked along the corridor, you would notice where the curb is right now. That's where the back of the sidewalk will be in the future condition. As we work farther east down the corridor, we get past the enhanced pedestrian crossing at Johnson Street. We're continuing with a section that is placing new sidewalk along the north side of the road, bike lane, 2 travel lanes for vehicles, another bike lane, and then on-street parking. And that continues all the way through to Hawaiihoshone Street. At Hawaiihoshone Street, we are proposing some bulb outs. That's to limit the crossing distance for pedestrians and other users of the sidewalk network across Hawaiihoshone and Kootenai. And that is section 4. Moving on to section 5, from Hawaiihoshone to Shoshone, you'll notice kind of a similar theme that's emerging now once we get past Hawaiihoshone. The proposed sidewalk, the widened bike lanes, the vehicle travel lanes, and the on-street parking. It's pretty consistent from Hawaiihoshone as we go past Gurley and Hervey all the way to Shoshone. Shoshone is another intersection that's being fully improved. We're going to add bulb outs along certain sides. There are bike lanes that are currently along Shoshone, so the bulb outs won't be impacting any of the bicycle movements along the north-south corridor. And the bulb outs along Kootenai will also not deter the traveled pathway of the bicycles along that stretch. Moving on to the last segment, this will be Shoshone to Vista. Again, we're proposing sidewalks along the north side, 2 vehicle lanes, bike lanes, and on-street parking along the south side. This continues all the way basically to Vista Avenue. There aren't any proposed improvements with Vista Avenue as a part of this project. The project will stop short of that. There are future improvement projects in the works for Vista Avenue, so that's why those will be coordinated at a certain point down the line. There is one more set of chicanes right before we get to Vista Avenue, and as you'll notice there, we're also showing the driveway repairs associated with this portion of the corridor. So that is a basic rundown of the current project street sections as we work our way all the way from Orchard to Vista Avenue. It's about 7,500 feet of roadway connection with this project. I'm going to hand this back over to Dave Rader. He's going to talk a little bit about schedule as we move forward.
Thank you, Pearson. So currently, just a brief overview of our project schedule. Right now, the project's in design, and we expect to finalize design in the fall of 2021. And before we did that, we did want to get feedback and comments from the public, and that's where we are today. Following the completion of design, we will have a small right-of-way phase of the project. And one thing I want to note is we do need to acquire some right-of-way through this project, but it's from a few properties and a small amount of right-of-way. ACHD will contact each property owner individually, and so just want to make you aware of that. Again, it's a small amount of right-of-way, just a few properties, but you can expect to hear from us if that is needed. We are anticipating construction in 2022. We expect construction to begin early in the spring of 2022 and finalize in the fall of 2022. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. My contact information is provided below, both my phone number and email, and please feel free to reach out to me with any comments, questions you might have following this meeting. And at this point, Pearson and I are going to stand for questions. So thank you. Yeah, and just a reminder, please enter your questions in the chat if you have any questions.
We, looking back at some of the chats, we noticed some of the questions were how this will help with traffic calming along the corridor. One of the biggest things is just the narrowing of the roadway will help slow traffic. Chicanes are another metric that, so the vehicle travel lane is being reduced from 11 feet down to 10 feet. That has a tendency to reduce the average traveling speed along a corridor. Another thing to keep in mind is that these chicanes, you know, there's some definitions that we have on a previous page, but the chicanes require vehicles to turn through this, and that actually helps slow people down. And those were placed in specific locations along the corridor to help try to reduce those speeds. So those are the major components of how the goal of the traffic calming will help reduce the travel speeds. A narrower cross-section road where the curb is coming in a little bit, the development of the bike lanes, narrower travel lanes, and chicanes. So there were some questions about why no chicanes between Owyhee and Shoshone. So more globally, one of the things about the chicanes, when we went through the concept, it was really, we had to kind of balance the access to the local properties and their driveways with respect to where the chicanes were going to be placed. And chicanes have to be placed, there has to be 2 of them for them to be effective. So when you start looking at the number of driveways that are along the corridor and the space you need to physically place the chicanes to meet the goal of slowing traffic down through those, that's where we had to kind of come up with some of that. And to follow up a little bit more on that, there's also not as many, not chicanes between Shoshone and Owyhee because the roadway is being narrowed because of the fact that we're placing the sidewalk along it. So that's helping as well.
Yeah, so we received a question about chicanes eliminating on-street parking. So it is possible that a chicane can eliminate some on-street parking only on the south side of Kootenai Street. Parking along all of the north side of Kootenai Street will be removed to construct the traffic calming improvements. So the answer is yes, some parking spaces may be affected by the placement of chicanes on the south side of the road.
We saw another question asking about sidewalk being replaced along the north side of Kootenai where it exists currently. So the current plan is not to replace any of those sidewalks. There might be some minor improvements that are taking place along there. There's some locations where their driveways are not compliant with current Americans with Disability Act standards, so those will be replaced. If there is a specific location that you have a comment on, we'd definitely like to hear about that.
So we have another question about bike lanes being protected by a curb. So the bike lanes will be protected behind the chicanes, but everywhere else there'll be standard bike lanes, so it would be paint. Again, they are protected behind the chicanes, but it is a standard bike lane outside the chicanes.
We got some great questions here. Thank you for being engaged. One of the questions was, why are there being chicanes placed so close to the signalized intersections when you're already coming to a slowing condition? And so, that's a good question. So when it's not in a red condition, people are still speeding through those intersections, and these chicanes will help promote slower speeds when they have the green light through the intersection. So, and that's happening on both sides of the intersection. So the goal is to just try to promote slower speeds as people navigate through those intersections.
Between Shoshone, will the sidewalk start from the curb and go to the street, or will ACHD access private property to create the sidewalk?
Oh, okay. So we have a question about the sidewalk location. It says, will the sidewalk start from the curb and go into the street, or will ACHD access private property to create this sidewalk? So that's a great question. We are trying to fit all these improvements, including the sidewalk within the existing roadway footprint. I think Pearson mentioned earlier that where you see the existing curb today, that will be the back of the new sidewalk.
So there's a question about bike lanes being painted or not. So the graphic for the presentation purposes was just to kind of convey the limits of where the bike lane is going to be. So there's not going to be green paint along the entire Kootenai as far as I'm aware. There will be striping designated to show the limits of the bike lane with respect to the vehicle lane. Similar to what you see on many of the bike lanes throughout Ada County currently. Hopefully that answers your question.
So the next question in the chat, and I might need some clarification on this question. It says, why does the number at line item SP 07013 add up to 943,000? Should it be 93,100? If you could add some more information about that question, it'd be helpful for us to answer that. Thank you.
So we got a question about, I just want to scroll down and take a look at this. I want to make sure we're answering. As you can see, Dave and I are kind of working through this together. Why do you think it is safer to eliminate parking on one side of the street? It's a good question, it's valid.
So we do have Brooke Green here who could speak to this question, but we saw the highest safety benefit adding sidewalks to the north side of Kootenai, because the schools, Monroe Elementary and South Junior High, are all in the north of Kootenai. So that was the primary factor why sidewalk was added to the north side.
We're just looking at some of these comments. We're trying to make sure we're addressing all the comments that are received. It's been really good questions coming through. We appreciate that. Dave, do you want to talk this one from Tiffany? Is the no parking on the north side a done deal? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the no parking on the north side of, Kootenai was, is at this point a done deal. It was, that came about through the development of the concept with public feedback. And, it was established kind of when the recommended concept study was adopted. So, I would say at this point, no parking on the, no parking on the north side is established.
So this comment from Zach here, I was just reading it as Dave was responding to that other one. If we go with option one, then the occupants exiting their vehicle will have to step into the irrigation ditch at the south side of Kootenai. So that will be behind the, so we're not changing the curb along that portion of Kootenai. So if that's for people that are in the passenger vehicle, I would imagine that's similar to the condition that exists currently. Because we're not changing anything from that curb line in along that side. We're just reconfiguring the way the paint on the road is going to look.
There's a question about crosswalk at Hervey Street. It says if you do not have crosswalk at Hervey, all people will not be able to cross safely.
There's a question about if we do not have a crosswalk at Hervey, all people will not be able to cross the street safely. What are your thoughts? They will be able to cross at Shoshone, which is in relative proximity to Hervey Street. So if they're trying to access that, we understand that you might be talking about crossing to get to that sidewalk, but that's a condition that exists today. So that's a similar scenario. What we can do is determine if a crosswalk is warranted there, but generally speaking, we've kind of already gone through that process and identified key crossing locations along the corridor. The next comment was from Chris.
So will the new signals at Latah and Roosevelt still favor on, let's see, did that cut off a little bit? Sorry, excuse me.
So what it said was, will the new signals at Latah and Roosevelt still favor traffic on those streets instead of the traffic on Kootenai as they do today? So that's a good question. So so the signal timing is defaulting on Latah and Roosevelt for the northbound, southbound traffic. There's going to be a new controller installed, and it'll probably be a little bit more intelligent than the current signal that exists today. But priority will likely be given along Latah and Roosevelt because that's where the higher demand for vehicle travel will be there. So yeah, but that's a good question because that is what currently happens. We haven't been talking much about the positive reinforcement comments because there's not a whole lot to us to respond to, but we appreciate you throwing those in there.
Yeah, so as there was a question earlier about the project costs, and I think one thing to point out in terms of how much the project costs is during the concept phase, it is a concept and a concept level estimate, and as more details are refined through the development of the design, the project estimate also becomes refined. So this is really something we're keeping aware of. We're keeping track of and monitoring at ACHD to make sure we have the appropriate budget for this project. So thank you for that question.
And as we've been going, to kind of follow up with what Dave's saying there, one of the things to keep in mind is with the change in the chicane staying at the grade of the road, there's a pretty substantial cost savings associated with the drainage improvements that will not need to occur now as a result of that. So we're always looking at ways to try to minimize the cost and maximize the value. And that's one example of where that cost savings will be realized.
There's a question about tree removal.
Yeah, so there's a question about tree removal, how many trees? We at this point in the design, we've identified some trees that may need to be trimmed, but we haven't, since the one thing to keep in mind with respect to that question is a lot of the improvements are happening within the existing footprint of the road. So now there is some along the east end of the along the west end of the corridor near Pond Street. There is some areas, I believe, where we identified some tree trimming, but there is not a substantial impact to any of the trees along there. There is probably going to be some tree trimming that's going to occur at the intersection of Latah and Kootenai. For any of you that have navigated through this corridor before, you know there's some pretty large ivy where the signal is located along that southwest corner. So there will be we'll have to kind of do some landscaping improvements there.
So there's a question from Brian. What will be the cost for sidewalks on both sides of Kootenai Street? So we could develop an estimate for that, but again, we were kind of balancing what we heard through the development of the concept and what would calm traffic in Kootenai. So primarily, we wanted to fit traffic calming improvements in the existing roadway footprint. So we landed on sidewalk on one side of the street, and again, that is the north side of the street. That way we can retain some of the neighborhood characteristic through all the mature landscaping and large trees out there on Kootenai. So it was a bit of a balancing act, but I could follow up with you if you're interested on the cost for sidewalk on both sides.
We're just navigating through some of the comments, making sure we're addressing the ones that are coming in the order that we're receiving them.
So we got one. Can we get a crosswalk at Abs and Kootenai? So we don't have there's a question here from Chris about getting a crosswalk at Abs and Kootenai. So for this project, we don't have a crossing plan there. We are looking at adding some receiving ped ramps on the north side of Kootenai at this location. Adding a crosswalk is something ACHD would have to evaluate in the future. It's something we can take a look at, but not something that's currently incorporated with this project. Okay. Well, we got a question about the four-way blinking stoplights stay at Hawaiihoshone and Shoshone.
Is there a question about removing that or not? So the current plan is to not change anything with that.
Yeah.
So there's a question about the blinking light at Hawaii and Kootenai. We don't have anything identified in the plans currently to remove that. So as far as we understand with the project at this point, the answer will be no. We're going to retain that as it is. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, there was a comment about a chicane blocking access to a driveway, and yeah, so one thing we are not doing is going to prevent access with a chicane. So I don't think we have identified any chicanes that are blocking access at this point, but it's something we can double check and make sure. But yeah, I can say that no chicanes will block driveways.
So I think we're getting some comments about the cost based on what was in the concept. So those are going to be revised as we get, now that we're in the design phase, those are going to be revised. The $1,000 difference, talking about from Zach on page 10. With the addition of the signals, the cost of the project is going to go up as a result of that. From a pure construction ballpark figure number, those work out to be about $125,000 per intersection. So that's about $250,000 additional dollars that has been identified and allocated for this project as we go forward.
Okay, it looks like there's a question about will homeowners be notified when construction begins in the area? So yes, we will absolutely notify everyone prior to the start of construction. We typically send out a postcard to the area to let everyone know. We also send letters out to everyone who lives on the corridor. We will also be posting updates on our website, so we will let you know when construction is going to begin, so there's no surprises.
Here's a right-of-way question. So 60 or 80 feet, generally speaking, the right-of-way on Kootenai, once you get past Latol, is 80 feet. And then there's portions of it west of that where it is 60 feet. It does vary a little bit along it. So depending on where you're at along the corridor will determine whether or not that you're in that 60 or 80 foot section.
Brooke?
So there's a question from Zach, just to clarify, sorry if you have already addressed this, but how is this different than the already approved plan in 2018? Well, it's really not much different, which is, I think, great news. I guess, the most significant changes from the concept are the new signals being installed at Latah and Roosevelt. Those are the most significant changes from the concept, but really, it's pretty much the same.
Again, we appreciate the feedback we're getting about the people that are in favor of the project. We do appreciate the questions. I think we just talked about the comment from Kristen. Traffic control shows cost of 2.5%. What are the considered material costs in your line items? I don't know if that's based on the concept, but we'll have, once we advance this to final design, which is what we're working on right now, we'll have a line-by-line breakdown for the costs associated with any potential flagging, temporary traffic control to maintain pedestrian access, vehicular access, and anything else associated with traffic control.
So there's a question here about ACHD investigating traffic calming measures for the section of Kootenai between Vista and Federal Way. So I'm not aware of any investigation that's going on now, but similar to what happened at this project, we can investigate any traffic calming. And yeah, so you could submit a request to ACHD or work with your neighbors to get a petition together and submit that to ACHD, and it's something we can look at.
For those of you that are in the chat, I hope you'll notice that we added the Survey Monkey. Please make sure you fill that out. We appreciate the input and feedback as we're advancing through this project.
So we have a question here. Removing cars along Kootenai between Vista and Federal Way does not seem to calm traffic. Should we expect similar results? So yes, I think you can expect for vehicles to travel slower through Kootenai with the implementation of these traffic calming devices, chicanes, bulb outs, narrower travel lanes. I think you can expect. That's something you can expect. So yeah, I think I do too want to thank everyone for your questions and comments. I think we have got most of those answered. If we haven't addressed your comment or question, please leave it in the chat. I do really appreciate everyone's time and engagement in this project. It's really a great project to be involved with, so thank you. Oh, there's a question about, can something green be planted in the bulb outs? So the answer to that is yes. And I reached out to the neighborhood depot bench to see if they may be interested in improving those bulb outs. Oh, sorry, not bulb outs, chicanes. Sorry, chicanes. So if the neighborhood is interested in landscaping the chicanes, that is something we can take a look at. So I just ask anyone that's involved with the Depot Bench Neighborhood Association to reach out to me, and that's something we can try to incorporate.
So we threw the contact information back up there for Dave Rader, the ACHD project manager. As we work forward and move this towards the final design phase, obviously we're going to be reaching out to a few of you. We're having some right away. But again, this will be out on the website for the next couple, open to comments for the next couple weeks, and that closes
July 22nd.
Okay. We really appreciate all the input and feedback you provided us. We really like the engagement. We can tell people are passionate about this corridor, and we want to thank you for that.
Yeah, so thank you all for your time. We really do appreciate it.